there everybody, it's Mark Riley. I'm back with another How to Draw video. This is going to be the first time that I release one of my videos to my Patreon supporters 1 week before I make it available to the rest of the YouTube viewing public. And so that's going to be one of the benefits of joining my Patreon. I'll go ahead and put the link in my description of this video. And if you're just watching on YouTube, I appreciate your support as well. But I did want to get the word out there about that new benefit. Now, what we're doing today is going to be comparing line quality of the same drawing. I'm going to use almost entirely curved lines on this version and almost entirely straight lines on this version, and we're going to see what happens in terms of the look of it and how you feel about it almost as a viewer. Now, I've got the basic guidelines in place, but I do need a little more structure in here, so I'm going to just go ahead and jump into that. And one thing that you'll notice is that when I'm doing the curved lines, and I've talked about this in my videos before, I'm trying to follow the natural pivot point of my wrist. And even though I've got this taped down right now to the surface that I'm drawing on so as to sort of maintain a perfect focus on it, I may have to untape it so as to take full advantage of, as I was saying, that pivot point of my wrist to get those extra smooth lines. Like this area right here, for example, I think would benefit if I take this off and turn it like so. That's going to help me to get these curving lines to flow more naturally here. See what I mean? And then over here, I would turn it the opposite direction to have the lines curve gently in that direction. So that's maybe a piece of advice right there. If you're doing curving lines, don't be afraid to move the page around a little. And basically what I'm doing in this illustration is every single part of it, whether it's like the upper eyelashes or any other detail, I'm going to try to keep curving every single line. And you know, like inside of her eyes are going to be these highlights. I'm going to make that a circle, whereas when I come over here, I'm going to make it much more boxy and angular. Just the whole idea of this is to make you consider what kind of lines are you using in your drawings, regardless of what it is that you that is the sort of subject matter. You will find that the line quality has an effect on how people perceive the drawing, what kind of a feeling they get from it. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is kick this into time-lapse. Thanks to Old Man Time-Lapse. You could never do any of these videos without me, Crilly. And I am going to go finish this one up with all the curved lines before we move on to the next one. And I talk a little bit about my approach to making a drawing using entirely straight lines. So bear with me. I'll go ahead and finish this up, and we will be right back. Alright, well, there you see a fairly conventional looking manga style drawing. I think it's safe to say that, especially for these shoujo drawings, it's very common for curved lines to be the main type of line work that you see. I think things are going to get interesting, though, when we come over here and go for the super straight lines. I just wanted to add one thing, and this applies to both of these drawing styles. You don't see me going over lines a second time too much. I may at the end come back and say, you know, I want these lines to be a little darker, and I'll go in and beef those up a little bit. But the goal for me, generally speaking, is to try to get it all done with a single line. And that ends up being more beautiful than when you keep going over and over again. I mean, more beautiful, it's a matter of taste, but certainly a lot of professional-looking drawings, if you examine them closely, you'll see that the person did it with a single, confident, sweeping motion of the hand and just got that one line right where they needed it to be. So let's go ahead and move on here, and give me a second. I'm going to sharpen my pencil and come back and in real time begin to start doing the line work all with straight lines. All right, and as we get into this, you may have noticed that I pulled out a sheet of paper to sort of stop my fingers from smearing the drawing too much. That is certainly a useful little tip there if you find that your drawings are getting, all smeared up by your own hand. Now you'll see that again, I'm trying to work with fast movements of the hand, and for me that helps me get the lines straight. The more I slow down, the more the sort of tremolizing of my hand shows up in the line. So if you move really quickly, you can get a smoother, straighter line. I'm not obsessing with ruler straight lines here. There's probably a very slight curve to a lot of these lines, but certainly compared to what we did over here, you see me trying on purpose to make everything a little more angular. But I do want it to sort of correspond with what I did on the other illustration so that we can really do a kind of a fair comparison. So you see this ribbon over here, which I would say is almost sort of Disney-like. I think Disney animated illustrations in the old days especially have a lot of curving lines that make them sort of kind of cute. And I think that's, the whole purpose of doing this video was to sort of maybe talk a little bit about the psychological effect that angular lines have on you versus curving lines. I think that part of the reason that all those, if you look at an old drawing of Mickey Mouse and you see that it's largely composed of very smooth curving lines, is that there's something friendly and approachable about curving lines, and it certainly lends itself to humor, like in the case of Mickey Mouse and characters like that. Whereas when I think of the straighter lines, to me it starts to look a little cooler. Or I would use a lot of, for like a sci-fi story or an action comic book, you might find that using straighter lines almost psychologically results in the reader interpreting this as a kind of a cooler story, a story that's not going for humor, not going for cuteness, right? So kind of my whole thinking with this was to talk a little bit about that, and just whether you choose, and there's, I should say that there's no reason to choose one or the other. I'm almost artificially doing an unusually angular drawing over here. Of course, you can combine them and do a mix of straight lines and curving lines. This is, in a way, this is more of like an experiment almost than a representation of a real style that I would do. But I feel like I've seen manga and comics that are done with a fairly angular style, just as that's the artist's quality of line. Look at how pointy I've made that chin. That in itself is quite a big break with what I did over here, where it's all very rounded. And even the upper eyelash line, which I would almost always make curved to some degree, I am going to go with angles this time. So I think hopefully I've sort of said enough about that. I'm going to go ahead and finish up my pencil lines and go all the way through. You probably noticed my trusty black Prismacolor coming in here to darken up those lines at the end. I'll probably do the same with this one, and then after I've finished both, we can come back and compare the two of them and see if we have indeed a slightly different feeling about this exact same character based solely on the differing quality of line. All right, I'll be right back. Alright, well, I finished up the line work on this version over here, and it is interesting to compare the two of them and see if you get a slightly different feeling about the personality of this character, almost. As I was saying, this one may be looking, this one over here on the right, looking a little more cool, whereas this one looks a little more cute. But maybe more than that, I think what I've learned from this experiment is that the curving line style doesn't call a whole lot of attention to itself, whereas the angular line style really pulls your eye towards the lines. It becomes a bolder, more sort of graphic approach. So if that is something that you find appealing and you want, you want a sort of designed-looking style, try working in more of these angular lines to the way that you're working, because it certainly has a different effect. Whereas I think some people would say that this almost doesn't look like a style so much necessarily, whereas this is like, oh wow, this is an interesting, daring kind of way of drawing. So anyway, I hope you found that interesting. Of course, this can't be finished until we add the blushies, and this time I get to add circular blushies on this side. And yes, angular blushies. I think this is a first for the Mark Crilley channel. She actually is going to have rectangular blushies. Let me know what you think of that. Is she a robot? She's having rectangular blushies. It seems to go against the laws of nature. But give me a moment. I'm going to go ahead and grab my books so that I can thank anyone who has supported me by getting them, like My Last Summer with Cass. This is a graphic novel, has a sort of a mix of angular and curved lines. This one, The Comic Book Lesson, my graphic novel that teaches you how to make comics. A little more of a curved, cute style going on with this one. And of course, there's Mastering Manga 1, 2, and 3, my series of books that show you how to draw in a manga style. I want to thank you all who have helped me by purchasing one or more of those books, but I think it's time for me to lay down this pencil. I want to thank you all for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be back with another one real soon.